Hi, this is Anita from Real Estate Crunch. Let's talk a minute about rising interest or interest rates, and specifically how an interest rate can affect a home buyer and seller. Interest rates are one of those crucial things that affect home buying and home selling. Let's first of all talk about how they affect a home buyer. Well, first of all, number one, you will have higher monthly mortgage rates with a higher interest rate. For example, let's say you have a $300,000 mortgage at a 4% interest cost. That would cost you about $1,432 monthly, principal and interest only. But if that rate rises 1%, just only 1% to 5%, your monthly increase would be $1,610. So almost a $200 increase with just the 1%. So imagine what happens if it raises 3% or 4%, how much higher your monthly rates would be. So that's why, higher interest rates reduce the purchasing power. A buyer that could maybe afford a $400,000 home at a 3% interest rate may only be able to afford a $350,000 home at a 5% interest rate, because of that difference of that 1% rate had made the difference of what kind of home they could afford. So this reduction could limit choices. It can push the buyers to settle for a less desirable property, and or it could delay purchases. Higher interest rates increase the overall cost of home ownership. Let's say a $250,000 loan at 4% interest over 30 years, is about $179,674 in interest. At 6%, it jumps up over $100,000 at $289,000 and $589,000. So just that 1% jump, it jumps up $100,000. And that's why a lot of people discourages people from buying. It means that fewer first-time buyers can enter the market when there's higher interest rates because it is so much more expensive. And it also has for a market uncertainty. There's a psychological impact. You're paying more for it. That's why there's a shift towards adjustable interest rates, or ARMs, ARMS, to combat the rising costs. Some buyers turn to adjustable mortgage rates, which have lower initial interest rates, but come with the risk of future increases. So in other words, if you do that type of interest rate, you might end up with some higher increases, and suddenly you might find that your interest rate has gone up high and suddenly you're paying much more than you would have. How does it affect home sellers? Well, first of all, it reduces the buyer demand. You have a lower demand and you might get fewer offers just because the interest rates are high. It could mean that there could be declining home prices. A home that listed at $500,000 during the low interest rate environment might need to reduce to $475,000 to attract buyers to a higher interest rate. So right there, it's $25,000 less for a home. How homes may spend a longer time on the market. There might be fewer move-up buyers, meaning that buyers may not want to sell their property, move to another property, because there could be a fewer pool of buyers. There could be a pressure for you to offer incentives. Maybe there's going to be fewer buyers out there. You're going to need to offer different incentives, which could temporarily reduce the buyers to buy the property. You can have increased competition from new construction. New home builders a lot of times have the resources. They can be incentivized. They can be quite aggressive, rate buy downs or upgrades to lure buyers into the high interest rate market. They might be, giving them these extra things which you just can't compete with. And there can be emotional and financial stress for sellers who must move due to life change like job, divorce, or downsizing. The challenge of a high interest rate environment can be extremely stressful and financial strain. So, these might make you, accept a deal which is less than what you want. So you may be forced into a situation where you're selling at a loss just because you need to get rid of the property and, things have changed. There's lots of reasons why, interest rates is important for the buyer and for the seller. And, that's why interest rates is an important aspect of buying or selling a home. We've written a blog on this, why rising interest rates affect buyers and sellers. And if you'd like to be able to learn more about this, we suggest that you read this so you can understand a little bit more about this. If you're, looking to buy property or if you're looking to sell property, this may help you to be able to understand a little bit more of some of the psychology you can use for that. This is Anita from Real Estate Crunch. We hope that you've enjoyed this podcast. And if you have any questions or comments, we sure love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening.